Hello and welcome to Velocity Talks. My name is Christopher Durham, and this is the Velocity Institute's opportunity to talk to all the cool people in the private brand and the retail industry. Today we have Trevor Young from Aura. Welcome, Trevor. It's great to have you.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Before we jump in with Trevor, I have to do the YouTube thing and say, please click below, subscribe, like. It helps the algorithm. It'll make sure that you're told about it every time we publish something new on YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube, go to YouTube and subscribe there as well. All right, Trevor. So tell us about who Trevor Young is.
Yeah, great. So, yes, Trevor, I'm 41, about to turn 42, born and raised in London, UK, but now I live about 200 miles north in a much colder part of the UK, near to Bradford and Leeds, for those that have got reasonably good geography. And I live in a lovely little home with my wife, my two boys who are 14 and 10, and our little dog Murphy, Cockapoo for dog fans, who's just a really big fan of Liverpool Football Club, for those that follow soccer. And right now, I'm just really enjoying traveling, seeing the world, about to take my wife to Mexico for her 40th before we jet to Finland and Lapland to hopefully meet Santa Claus with the kids.
Oh, that's really fun. And you can call it football over here too. Actually, our team in Charlotte, our pro team in Charlotte is Charlotte FC. And they beat Messi this weekend. So
Cool. Yeah, very good.
everybody
It's
was very excited
football.
to both see Messi and to beat him. So
Yeah, when they could afford to get in the stadium, right?
I think you got to remember these are American football stadiums, so I think there's about 80,000 seats. So you could get tickets for $50 now. They're way up there. Yeah,
Pretty good.
they're really high in the stadium. It's a fabulous time either way. Very good. So tell us who you work for, and I know you have an interesting story around how you guys got there and private brand and the whole nine yards. So give us some insight into that.
Yeah, great. So Aura are actually a reasonably new company when you think about the name. Established in November 2022, and our clients are the likes of Walmart and Amazon. Two reasonably small companies just to start things off.
Yeah, reasonably
Uh,
small.
yeah, not demanding in any way. Actually, it's a pleasure to work with both of them because they're really committed to sustainability. Who are Aura? We're actually a group of packaging consultants who are determined to change the planet. We want to save what we've got. And the whole idea behind the organization is to enable, support, educate, provide insights to global organizations when it comes to their packaging. And in particular, we really focusing on packaging data because that's an area that is going to become more and more challenging as the world becomes more data led to utilize accurate data to drive positive change. And beyond those two organizations that I've mentioned, we also do a lot of consulting work around packaging design, structural. We look at legislation, we understand what's happening out there in the global marketplace, whether it's UK, European, North American legislation. So we're really just there as a reference point for our clients to ensure they stay compliant, but also really challenge what they're doing to be more sustainable in the packaging world. And when you talk about private label, that private brands, that is a really big focus for these organizations because they have hundreds of suppliers, hundreds of vendors. Packaging is not necessarily something that has been a vital focus over the past 10, 15 years, but with legislation growing, it's changing. And without data, those organizations will really struggle.
So let's get a little bit technical then, so we make sure you understand what you guys are selling. So you're selling basically software as a solution to collect data for that sustainability part of packaging. So where is it made? What is the product? What is the substrate? All of that sort of thing. Am I understanding correctly?
Absolutely, Chris. So I'll give you an example because I was explaining this to a Canadian retailer just last week. If you have 5,000 SKUs in your private brands, each one of those has around 25 to 30 data points in order to properly evaluate the recyclability or sustainability of the SKU, right? In our research, organizations are either not collecting data at all, or they have between 5 and 10 data points. Okay, so they need to increase their data points by 200, 300%. Then within that, there are maybe 10 to 12 components per bill of materials. So when you start doing the math and you multiply the 5,000 SKUs by 30 data points by 12,
It's a lot.
suddenly you've got a pretty mega spreadsheet. And I'm sure you've experienced this in your work life, but also when you're working with these organizations. That is a lot of data. And actually, people are fearful of trying to do something about it. They don't know where to start because they haven't necessarily got the budget. It's hard to explain why you'd need to collect a million lines of data. And then the question is, what are we going to do with that data? Why is that data helpful to us? And you and I have had this conversation more than once about right sizing. Not necessarily always about lightweighting, but right sizing. The benefit of that logistically, commercially, sustainably. But then it's all of that legislation that's going to start putting pressure on private brands to report and evaluate their packaging, pay fees as well, taxes. Suddenly it becomes a really challenging conversation because you're going to go to your finance team and ask for a budget that potentially could lead into the millions of dollars.
Yep.
The justification is what? Oh, because our data tells us we need to pay these fees. What we're selling is absolutely software as a service, but it's a little bit more than that, Chris. It's the support around it to capture the information from vendors who we all know are trying their best, but with very tight margins are resource challenged. And if you can imagine asking them for 30 different pieces of data for one SKU, they're going to look at you and say, that's a challenge, right? That's a really big challenge for us. So we've got this whole supply chain issue, this really big challenge that's coming over the hill. And I don't think anyone in the supply chain is necessarily 100% ready for it. In fact, I think it was you that said it at your recent conference in Austin about the state of green, right? This is your own. I think you said 43% of the organizations questioned said they're experiencing complexities in gathering data. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nearly half. And if that's the case, I'm not surprised, but two, we've got a big challenge on our hands if every 1 in 2 companies is struggling.
I think there's a lot of stuff going on, not the least of which is a generational shift from the old white guys that ran the business who had spreadsheets and pieces of paper and all of this stuff to millennials. And we're not far off from Gen Z who just expect it to be there, right? They just, why that data's collected somewhere. Why didn't it get to me? You guys seem to be at that inflection point where it's going to happen regardless. Combine that with EPR, where, and for those of you who don't know EPR, right, extended producer responsibility, essentially countries and states are going to charge manufacturers and retailers for the packaging that comes into their state and how it gets disposed of, whether they like it or not. So it's not that you have to ask for a budget, you're getting billed, period.
Okay. Yeah. So the software we've created, Ehalo, currently being used by the organizations I've mentioned, it takes away a shed load of pain because we understand the legislation, we understand the data points that need to be collected. Those retailers don't have to worry about collecting the right data. And then we support their vendors to input it for them. So Ehalo does a lot of the heavy lifting. And I think for me, when you start thinking about how long it takes to capture data, my estimates are somewhere in the region of 25 to 50 employees could spend their entire work lives just collecting data. Well, you could invest in technology that, of course, will save you time. Updating one SKU, which can then be copied to 500, has got to be a time saver, right? So yeah, we're really excited about the year ahead. EPR is coming in to 4 US states in 2025. Who knows how long it will be before other states adopt it, but I think over the next 10 to 15
No,
years.
one of them is California. It might as well be coming nationwide. It's
Exactly. Everyone's got their eyes on California and the challenge that's going to pose. So that's what we're really focused on over the next 12 to 18 months, helping organizations prepare. And from an educational perspective, we're doing a lot of work. So I'm just about to launch an educational podcast called Trev Talks. Bit of a
cool.
play. It's got a cool feed called Recycling Room 101. I don't know
Mhm.
how many people watched the BBC growing up, but we used to have this show called Room 101, where you used to try and put a topic into Room 101 and it would get flushed away for good. There was this lady called Anne Robinson, quite a famous host of TV channels, and she tried to get the Welsh put in to Room 101. It's going to be a cool feature, right? In fact, I'm going to have to get you on there, Chris, because I reckon you've got some
Sure.
controversial things to throw in there.
Why not?
And that whole podcast is there
Mm.
to talk to industry leaders about the challenges they see coming, right? So I think there's a lot of collaboration that can occur over the next 5 to 10 years that's going to help everyone.
So, obviously, you've talked about EPR. You got your podcast coming up. I can tell you, I talked to a retailer, a large one last week, who said their unexpected consequence of using this kind of service was that manufacturers had access to their data and they started realizing they just weren't doing a good job at some of the things.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
they were seeing basically waste happening, and they're like, that's money going out of our pocket. Let's make the box smaller. That's whatever. And the retailer didn't even have to ask them to fix it.
Yeah. I think once again, it's a challenge with data, but interpretation of data. Because I think so many people spend a huge amount of time capturing data that they don't have time to analyze it, right?
Mhm.
I imagine we all are mercy a bit to our inboxes, and you get request after request. You struggle perhaps to prioritize. And when you've got so many tasks to do, you just try and respond. And actually, the really valuable part is when you can take a step back and interpret data and say, how can I use that to save this business money or to help the environment, and so on and so forth. One of the conversations I've had quite regularly, you mentioned speaking to retailers, I'm having similar conversations, is that most of them haven't even started capturing the data. I almost want to say, period.
And
Because
it
that's the
terrifies
challenge.
them because most of them have also made big claims to Wall Street about what they're gonna do.
Yeah, like I
Right, we're
think
gonna
you
reduce by X amount. We don't really know how much we have to begin with.
yeah, here we are, right? It's 2023. We've had the internet in our homes since about 1997, and we've now got AI, which is doing a lot of heavy lifting for a lot of people. But still, organizations haven't yet realized that in order to make claims, you probably need a base point. And I think there's an element of fear in there as well, Chris, that if they suddenly get accurate data, the base point that they started from might need to be changed, and they
I'm
don't
sure it
want to
will. I'm
pick
sure
at
it
that.
will.
They don't want to start playing with that because it's a challenging conversation to then go back to Wall Street and say, you know what, guys, being 100% recyclable isn't going to happen for at least X number of years, let alone in the next 2 years. It's going to be 7 or 10 years. And of course, businesses are there to make money, right? We're not all not for profit. So it's a really challenging conversation. It takes a lot of bravery, I think. And there are certainly companies out there that are being brave and bold. And I think and hope more organizations will take that mantle and push themselves forward.
We agree on that. So talk to me a little bit because obviously you're collecting all the data, but how if I'm sitting at a retailer or a manufacturer, how am I interacting with that? How is it helping me? Because if it's
Okay.
just 30,000 points, well, what the hell do I do with that?
Yeah, I think for us, we provide a significant level of consulting with that data, right? We actually present the data to the retailers in bespoke dashboards that are
Mhm.
real time, live, So as an example, we can calculate recyclability against how to recycle guidelines instantly. That's what Ehalo does very well. Our friends at Green Blue and How to Recycle are doing a great job really educating the marketplace on how to recycle, what should be recycled at curbside, etc. But evaluating that can be a quite onerous process. Our system can inform a vendor or a retailer immediately because we've built that into the system. But we've also built in what we call at risk and banned. So if we start talking about things like PFAS, carbon black, oxygen scavengers, these can all be flagged in Ehalo to alert the retailer or the brand or the CPG, whoever's looking at the data, to then focus in on it and make a change. So you talked before about manufacturers just waking up to the data. If they're working with, say, Walmart, those vendors can actually see all of their packaging data in the same way that Walmart are digesting it and just click on whatever they find interesting to look at opportunities and say, okay, we're just going to eliminate PFAS. We can see we've
Well,
got
so
it in.
Trevor, let me stop you for a second. So for those of you who don't know PFAS, okay, and I won't get the name out, but basically there's a whole set of chemicals that are used in foods and packaging that are typically called chemicals of concern. There's a great organization called Toxic Free Future that tracks all of that and does it. Actually, they spoke at the Sustainability Summit that most retailers at this point have created lists of chemicals of concern that they don't want in their packaging because of health risks or whatever. PFAS is the number one that everybody talks about right now. And I think even more so than the recyclability, most manufacturers and retailers don't have a clue if it's in their packaging. They just don't.
Yeah, and that's the point, that we can collect 5 data points and it could just be the dimensions and the weight and the substrate of packaging, or we can actually try and make a meaningful change and ask the challenging questions so that we can save the environment. And that is why we need to be brave and bold, because if we don't take responsibility, nothing will change.
Absolutely.
And the positive thing I can see is in the last year, I've been to your event, I've been to a number of different community events. There is a growing tribe of organizations that care.
Yeah. They're trying to figure it out. They're trying.
Yeah. I think it's gone very well, actually. I think the last year I've already seen major strides.
So that gets us to our next regular question. It's that conversation around the future. So where do you think we're going with sustainability, with private brand, with retailers the next 5 or 10 years? Obviously it's crystal ball, so we're all just making this up, but
I think the exciting thing is bringing sustainability into commercial business practice. It's recognizing the value in choosing sustainable solutions. As an example, my kids are going to start making their own purchasing choices when they fly the nest. More and more of the next generation are going to want to choose sustainable solutions. And that is a positive thing, not just for the environment, but it's an opportunity for private brands. And if they embrace that, they will be able to differentiate themselves from their competition. So my call to action for private brands is to embrace that now.
yeah.
I think it was Whole Foods that said it at Velocity Sustainability Conference in Austin. It's better to take initial pain now because you'll see the benefits in the longer term than to wait and miss the opportunity. And that's where I see the next 10 to 15 years, because organizations are waking up. They recognize that EPR is coming. It's going to be 50 different states, all looking at things slightly differently. Take some initial pain, get your data, have a strategy, set meaningful, challenging goals, and really invest, because all anyone's going to be talking about by 2050 is net zero. So you may as well get on board now, because otherwise you'll just be scrambling around later.
Honestly, if they've got the data, they should what they've got to do right now is evaluate it. Every pack and an entire portfolio audit. Now, some of them will be easy, cans or cans, right?
Make it part of your purchasing process, right?
Yeah.
Don't leave packaging to the last 2 weeks of an MPD process. If anything, take control and investigate the total cost of goods through that 9 or 6 month process when you're launching a new product. Because I genuinely believe that you'll sell more, you'll make more money, and you'll be more sustainable as a business if you consider all of those elements.
And we can't recycle our way to solving this. So start
No,
from the get-go, make the pack the right size out of the right material and
exactly.
include the recycling information. That's awesome.
And that's why we're here, right? Anyone listening to this, if you're wondering, is this a good choice? That's what Aura are here to do.
Yeah.
So, just drop a line.
We always finish up with the same 5 questions. These are the fun part. Question number 1, what's your favorite word?
Revolution.
I like it.
Let's just change things, right? Nothing ever got better by staying the same.
Also a good Beatles song, so that's good. Question number 2, are you a more artistic or more mathematic person?
I wish I could say mathematical. I'm reasonably good when it comes to counting change, but I would definitely say artistic.
Very good. Number 3, if you could share a meal with anyone past or present, living or dead, who would it be and why?
Slightly sentimental, but my parents are originally from Malaysia, but moved to the UK for a better life. I never got to have a conversation with any of my grandparents. One, because they didn't speak English, and two, sadly, because they passed away before I could get to know them. So I'd love to have dinner in English with my grandparents. That would be great.
Number 4, what profession other than your own would you have liked to have attempted?
I like to be realistic with things. I would have loved to have been a footballer or soccer player, but I'm way too short for that. Not fast enough. I would definitely love to be a football agent, someone that actually identifies talent and helps that talent be nurtured, or failing that, a director in films. Love film.
Oh, man, that's a different take.
That's my artistic side, right?
Sure. That's the artistic side. I'm with you. And finally, number 5, if you could speak to yourself when you begin your career, what advice would you give yourself?
Be patient. And that applies to not just myself, but with others. And it's a long journey, right? And the only race is with ourselves. I know that's a bit cliche. You get to when I'm now 41, I'm trying to educate my kids on what life has in store for them. And I would just say to them, just be patient with yourself, because good things come. You just got to be patient.
We always like to close out the show with giving ourselves a little bit of a plug. So, coming up in Chicago, we have our Bold Bash, which is our networking event on the Monday night of PLMA at King's Entertainment. So, across the street from Rosemont, it's November 13th. Actually, the Aura team and Sun Branding are one of the sponsors. So, you can come and say hello to them as well. I don't think Trevor's joining us because he's going on the trip with his wife for her 40th birthday, but their team will be here. Then we will close out the year with our virtual event, which is the Velocity State of the Industry Virtual Summit. Both events are completely free. This State of the Industry, you will actually see in your email, if you're on our list, a set of research talking to the industry about sentiment. So how are you feeling right now? Are you hiring? Are you investing? Where do you think growth is? So it's about 15 questions getting to how are we feeling about the industry right now? What's the current state? That this will be the second year we do it, so we'll be able to measure against last year. That's always fun to have year-over-year data. So please make sure you take part in that. And as always, thank you very much, Trevor. We appreciate you joining us. And remember, subscribe.
Thanks, Chris. It's been great to be on. Really appreciate it.